Oh, beautiful you. We are live and we are create a life you adore. What is that like for you? Fun, fulfillment, freedom? Today, I'm very, 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 very excited to introduce to you the wonderful David De Angelis. I'm going to town on that pronunciation now. I've known of David for it feels like decades actually from when I used to live in London. David, you know, it doesn't say this in his bio, but to me, your family are phenomenal. You know, I love you guys. You blow my mind. But David describes himself as a visual alchemist, a philosopher, and a master guide. He's an author, speaker, and the creator of the global best-selling Starman Tarot. He's worked with some of the world's most incredible people, innovative organizations, including 7 years with Bowie. That's super cool. And his creative collaborations with David Bowie inspired him to create the Starman Tarot and actually fuels his passion for bringing extraordinary ideas to life. His art, his designs, his creations, his teachings are studied for their powerful messages and their ability to open people up to life transforming possibilities. Wow, how are we going to fit this interview into 30 minutes? I don't know, David. How are you today? And what's it like in terms of having a life you adore?
Well, hi. Firstly, thank you for having me on your amazing program. And, I love your energy. It's fantastic. So thank you for inviting me. And, it's like you said, it's how are we going to do this in 30 minutes? It seems almost impossible to encapsulate the whole thing. I think to begin with, the way I'd like to sort of open that question out is to say that you know it's an ongoing journey. I see life as an adventure and an exploration, and as long as I can keep that context open and alive, then my life just continues to get better and better. And many years ago, I was in a medicine circle with a very well-known, I probably won't mention her name, but she's kind of a very well-known shaman, or shamanka, we should say, really. And one of the things that I asked her was, "What is our purpose in this life?" And she said to me, "The only purpose in this life is to keep your creative spirit alive. So all you take with you is the love that you created." And that kind of stuck with me, really resonated with me, that actually when we get up every morning, we have that opportunity to embrace whatever comes our way and to, in a sense, alchemize that, to turn that into the process of love and creativity. So that's my kind of philosophy of how I approach life, and hopefully how I help other people through my art and the other things that I produce to kind of tap into that same way of looking at things, and then of course adapt and modify that according to their own life and circumstances. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it sparks some more, which is a good job, really. Okay, interview's done. So my question is for people, because this used to be me, okay? I had a very tough upbringing in Ireland, and there's a saying or a joke. I'm going to use a funny. Some may say bad language here, so watch out if you got kids listening or watching. The saying is, "Arrow, will you look at him, the happy fucker?" And it's like, I love Ireland. I love the Irish, and we're born with this kind of sense of humor where it's a protection, and it's not always a good thing. Okay, now, so going back to my question, there was times in my childhood and as I was navigating my teens and 20s and stuff. And this is not just, obviously, we're not here in a therapy session for me, but I know that a lot of people come to me and they're like, Gerri, having a life outdoors for other people, look at me, I've got cancer, I've got this, or, look at my bank account. What would you say to people that have, especially when you think of what's been going on in the world the last few years, who knew we could be so strong and navigate that? But what would you say to people who maybe lost it all, or lost friends, or just in a really difficult place?
Well, there's a great saying, when when your house is on fire, don't tell people it'll be okay. You just give them some water to put it out with. So, you know, this kind of idea of trying to sort of railroad people into feeling better about things generally doesn't work for most people. Because if you're in a bad situation and basically your life sucks, someone coming along and saying, well, just think positive, and everything's going to be okay and all of that, it may have some validation, but what I've found is that you actually need some real practical things that you can share with people to allow them to reframe and review and recreate the context in which those situations and circumstances arise, because they're going to arise anyway. So if your bank balance is empty, it's no point in saying to someone, "Oh, don't worry, just do what you love and the money will show up." I mean, that really doesn't cut much ice, and it never really resonated with me either. And one of the things that I've really concentrated on generally is to, how do you actually take action in the world, powerful actions to allow you to gradually shift from one state of being to another. Now, occasionally you can just shift, but generally what I've found is it's a little bit like the phrase, the Japanese phrase, Kaizen. It's small incremental improvements over time add up, and eventually you realize, oh, I'm not the same person that was approaching that problem way back then. So the first thing I would say to someone is that you have to look at the context, and the context really is the viewpoint of your life. So the frame in which you look through in order to see the situations and circumstances in your life. So first of all, address the context in which that life is showing up for you. And there's various ways we can talk about that. There's various ways to do that. But, my view is it's really, you need to work practically with people, and you need to kind of come from where they're at. So, there's so many get rich quick schemes and millionaire, if you've got failing health, you have to, you need faith. Faith is an amazing thing, but you also need to we're in the 3D reality, this body, this avatar that, transduces spirit, whatever you want to call it, is in a 3D reality. So you have to address that. You can't just ignore that. So that would be the first thing that I would do with people. I would address their physical manifestation, how they relate to their body, their physiology, and make changes to that. Then, like I said, when that new context is created, and there's different ways you can do that, then the context itself starts to determine the actions that you take. So in other words, it's a little bit, people sometimes say, well, it's a little bit like, kind of AA, I hand my life over to a force greater than self. But most of us, including myself here, I'm not very good. If my life is left to me, I'm actually not very good managerial quality. So, if you can find this out early on and address that situation, then you understand that when you hire.
David, we lost you for a moment. Can you hear me? Are you there? Can you hear me? Are you there? No. I'm going to pause the recording. So we had a little glitch in our matrix then. So what we're going to do is we're going to serve you to an even higher level. So what we were talking about, David, as you know, is that sense of if someone is maybe poo-pooing the idea of whether they can create a life they adore, or if it's for them, no matter what their starting circumstances. You were sharing some real gold there about what I was getting was about baby steps and having glimmers of hope. Maybe let's circle back to the baby steps. Do you have any kind of next steps or tips that you would give people?
First off, I mean, people should poo-poo this stuff because, the most important thing is to have an inquiring mind, so if you can approach something and it's an intelligent thing to question things and not just accept things blindly. Like, huge amount of the problems in the world are people accepting things under blind faith, and we all know what happens when you accept things with blind faith. So, what you really need to do is when somebody offers you an opportunity to look at things from a different perspective, the first thing you should really do is to bring that into question. So in a way, what that does, it takes people out of that sort of, the spiraling downwards. And as soon as you can get someone to sort of engage in the question, and someone might say, well, look, had a life you adore. I mean, who has a life they adore? What does that even mean? Because as we know, life has huge variations. So we can wake up and, depending on what we did last night, what we ate, we can wake up and we can feel utterly amazing, and we feel like life is open and everything's possible. And then another day we can wake up and nothing seems possible. So, we have to question these things, and we have to approach things intelligently. And we also have to find ways in which to stabilize this incredible up and down that we always have. And the thing that I was saying before,
And that was another glitch in the matrix. And we've just downloaded some new incredible information for you. I'll hand it over to you, David.
well, maybe we should use the glitch in the matrix to, just really that thing of just understanding that, the complexity of life itself, and we all go through different phases, and, we can't just, like I said, blindly go forward without questioning. We have to question things, and it's a good thing that we can question these things. And the more we approach things with that, but there's a way. Also, I'll add an addendum to this. There's a way to question things. So just downright disbelieving things, completely right disbelieving something is not a very effective way of approaching things. So what I would suggest is that if you're presented with any kind of information or any possibilities, that you approach it with an open, creative mind. So questions are the things that enable us to live powerful lives. So the moment you step into the ability to question things, you've already opened up that extra level of possibility within your life. So, what I talk about is that I call them open questions. And the funny thing is that they're questions that don't demand answers. And that seems like a complete paradox or an anathema. How can you have a question that doesn't demand an answer? Well, the reason is because you live the answer. And an open question is something that you effectively sit inside the question and you look out from the question and you explore life from the question. So if you're looking at something like, a life you adore, and then you say, well, what would how could I adore my life? What would that look like? Who would I need to be in order to have that experience of life? And most people, when you get down to it, don't really know. So
So we're not going to use the word matrix, but we went a bit wobbly again, but we're using it to put us into higher vibrations. But no, seriously, David, thank you. And talk to us.
well, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we were talking about, before we were rudely interrupted by Providence, the providence of the internet. We were talking about, open questions and what it means to. I was talking about what it means to live inside a question, inhabit a question, and really that's kind of, for me, the whole key is that anybody that comes along and says to me, that they've got all the answers, I'm automatically not really on the same page as that. I don't feel I have answers. What I do have is kind of what I would say is a multitude of creative, exploratory, and effective questions that I look out from those questions, and the questions themselves start to form a dynamic where, like I said before, if I'm asking those questions within a powerful context, so I normally create the context of astonishment. So I invite life to astonish me. And then I sit in the question, like a situation arises, then I ask the question, what is astonishing about this situation? Or how can I transform, or what would transform this into something astonishing? And that, it's a very simple thing, actually. But what happens then is the context of astonishment and the question start to determine the actions that I take. So I'm not trying to figure this whole thing out, because if I'm trying to figure it out, I know pretty much that it's going to go horribly wrong. So I literally do hand my life over to a power greater than self. And in this case, however you want to frame that, it's the questions and the context in which I explore life through determine the actions that and the words that even that I speak about things.
I love that. A lot of your answers, I want to just say now, what I've been thinking as you've been speaking is how you so beautifully combine heaven and earth. Like some might call it woo-woo, with real grounded answers. I love it so much. I love it so much. And you reminded me of one of my favorite answers that people like Eckhart Tolle and the Dalai Lama, all of these incredible, I don't know if I look up to these people anymore, but I definitely used to.
Yeah.
And when they're asked, sometimes I hear, they're asked this what might be a complicated question. And I've heard Eckhart Tolle say this before, and he said, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, man, I love that. You know, that just shows someone who's really wise, but also humble. David, I want to know about David Bowie or Bowie or however we pronounce it, Bowie in Ireland. But yeah, how did you get to
I grew up with Bowie, actually.
Did
No,
you?
you
Did
know,
you?
it depends where you are, doesn't it?
I
Because
don't know. Is it American? But anyway,
yeah.
hi.
I'm
You
I'm
start.
sure he was cool with whatever.
Yeah, no,
Well,
sure.
ask away. What would you like to know? I'm
Well,
sure I
how did
can.
it start?
Hmm.
There's a conspiracy theory around his death. We want to even use the C word before the flipping internet goes again.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you learn from him? What was that? Yeah, what was that experience
Hmm.
like? So many questions.
Well, I mean, first of all, it kind of started in a way that I was what you might call I'm an artist, a designer, but I was working on some very unusual things. Even but this was back in the 90s, the early 90s, and combining lots of experimental ideas, philosophy with art, graphic design, and then these kind of new technologies were coming on board as well. So I was working in a very experimental area, and as you can imagine, when you're I mean, I was young, I was in my 20s, so I was still of an age where I was inexperienced in life enough to just forge ahead with whatever I felt I wanted to forge ahead with, regardless of whether it would earn money or and mostly it didn't earn money. And the truth is that thing of not earning money from what I was doing reached a zenith where I was running a business, a design and media business, an innovation business, and this business was making no money at all, and the bills were flowing in the door. And one day I got one of those beautiful letters from the tax office saying, you owe this amount of tax. And I had no means to pay that amount of tax. And I realized I did a quick calculation as best I could. I'm pretty maths dyslexic, but it wasn't too difficult to add the figures up. And I got to the point where I realized I had 3 months before they were going to come in and just close us down. And I had, I was employing people. I had a business partner who was another brilliant designer, absolutely amazing. And we were just, kind of experimenting with everything. So I came up with the idea. I said, well, look, we've got all of this incredible equipment. We've got a beautiful studio. And if we're going to go out in 3 months' time, I want to go out having done something astonishing, coming back to that frame. And I don't care how we do that, but I'm just going to create something astonishing. And so I ignored all of the normal signs. They said, instead we even had people coming to us with, mind-numbingly boring corporate jobs that would have paid the bills and sorted everything out. But I couldn't bring myself to compromise what I was doing and the ideas in order to fulfill just that thing of keeping the doors open and the lights on. And you could call it reckless and foolish, but I had something in my mind that said that something was going to happen. Something interesting and wonderful was going to happen. I didn't know what it was, and I just went with that feeling. And everybody else, I mean, their jobs are all on the line too. Trusted me for some reason. I managed to just. I think it was obvious. So that sense was visceral, and people could absolutely picked up on it. And they said, "Okay, we're going to trust you. Just go with it, do it." So I spent 3 months producing what was in those days, maybe not now, it wouldn't even be considered that, but in those days, it was very, very groundbreaking and innovative ideas and work. And I had no idea where that was going to go. And probably about, I don't know, it was probably about a week before the Grim Reaper from the tax office was due to come in. We were even getting final demand letters, everything, saying, you know, our representative will be calling upon your office in this, this
Oh,
time.
horrible. You can feel that visceral fear.
So I would, you know, I would have a pile of all of these final demands and letters from the tax office. And I just, they were just piling up on my desk, and I didn't open any of them. And mind you, this isn't a signal for everybody to
No. We're
repeat
not
what I
giving
was doing,
advice
by the
here.
way. But anyway, probably about a week before we were due to get closed down by the Inland Revenue. Oh, it wasn't just the inland; it was actually the Customs and Excise, VAT, and the Inland Revenue. So we had it was a double. It's like the you know, the IRS, and I don't know who the other one is in America. You know, but
Yeah.
the worst possible scenario. The two people that you just can't really argue with when it comes to owing
Yeah.
money. You know, you can debate with a bank or an individual or whatever, but I mean, these people just, when it's over, and you haven't got much wiggle room. So about a week before we were due to be closed down, I had all this incredible work that we'd done over, like, you know, I mean, it wasn't just me that did it. We had a team of people, and I was kind of art directing and doing different things, and none of us knew what was going to happen. But except I had this feeling that something wonderful was going to happen. So about a week before we were due to be closed down completely and all our equipment taken away and then, you know, kicked out onto the street, I got a phone call from a friend who was a journalist, and he said, I'm looking for a story for our magazine. We want a big spread. We were going to do something on this other designer, guy called Philip Stark. Probably people might reckon he's a famous product designer, and apparently he's problematic. He's you know, a proper prima donna, and they pulled this article, so they had like a big front cover and inside spreads and everything available. And he said, have you got anything that you think would be worthy of filling this space in this magazine? And so of course, I said to him, yeah, I've got loads of stuff for you. So we called him over, he sat down, we showed him the stuff, and he said, my goodness, this is like really amazing stuff. I've never seen anything like it. And they literally just did a massive spread on the whole thing. Lo and behold, when that magazine came out, I mean, we actually went past the point, funnily enough, when we would have been closed down. We managed to string it on for, I think, another week. But in that time, the magazine came out because it was already running a bit late.
Yeah.
David Bowie, on a flight from London to New York, reads that magazine. And this was it was no internet in those days, nothing. So we had our phone number of the studio on the bottom of the article. And so he gets to New York and he actually called me up.
It tingles all over constantly. Go on.
And we had a young girl that was doing work experience on our reception.
She didn't know
And
who it was.
she had no clue about any of this sort of stuff. And she put the call through to me. I was in my office, and she put the call through to me. And she said, oh, I've got a Mr. David Bowie on the line for you. And she didn't know she had no idea who David Bowie was, funnily enough. She was just, I think she was 15 or something, but she didn't. And I said, who? And she said, it's a Mr. David Bowie. And I said, I thought it was a joke. I said, it's got to be one of my friends just calling me up, you know, knowing that I'm on the edge. But there was something there was that part that thought something wonderful was going to happen that just kept that something going. So anyway, I took the call and I was knocked sideways. It was unmistakably David Bowie on the end of the line. And that was it. He said, you know, I love your work. I love what you're doing. I want you to work for me. And he said, you know, how quickly can you get on a plane?
Wow.
And funnily enough, the truth was I didn't even have the money to pay for the airfare. to get to the meeting.
Wow.
So, by hook or by crook, uh, 2 days, I think it was 2 or 3 days later, I'm in a meeting with David Bowie,
Oh,
and we signed. I mean, in those days, it was a lot of money. I signed a contract. I think it was, I can't remember. It was a lot of money, you know, and it literally solved the whole issue. So, but
unbelievable.
not only did it solve the whole issue, but it kind of opened up a whole world of possibilities, which is still opening up even to this day, like 20,
Wow.
however many years, 25 years, 30 years on.
Wow.
So
Wow,
absolutely.
unbelievable. How absolutely cool is that? Listen, before I ask you about the free gift that you're sharing with everyone, what a burning question. What was the work that you were producing at the time? What was it that he saw?
It was just a series of images with typography and animation, although they couldn't show the animations in the article. But it was just a way of using language and images and combining those, and just experimenting with these very unusual ways of presenting images and words. And like I said, it was very linked to philosophy and ideas about consciousness, mysticism, magic. It carried all of those connotations or influences. So it was more the combination of influences that allowed the work itself really had an energy, and it was palpable. Like I said, again, like that energy that was palpable or visceral when I knew something was going to happen, but I wasn't sure what. The work
Yeah,
itself really carried that spirit forward. And
it is a spirit. It's a daemon, isn't
mm,
it? I was getting that when you were talking about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a principle that exists in nature. It's a creative spirit. I really believe that there's a real creative spirit that exists, and it permeates through everything.
yeah.
And as human beings, we have the capacity to give some voice and give image and give, to create with it. It allows us, we can create with it, and it helps us to do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. We chatted before and we were kind of feeling out the idea of success coming when you stop searching. And then you were
Mm,
talking about this, and I thought actually that kind of maybe that story goes against that. But there is a sense of that, isn't it? Because you were turning down all these big corporate
mm.
affairs. So I don't know, was there something bigger calling you?
Oh yeah, I think you've got to, especially if you're a creative person, this world isn't necessarily always that inviting and open to the creative spirit. In fact, quite often, the culture that we find ourselves in, although we seem to be awash with images and there seems to be this creativity everywhere. Or you look on Instagram or whatever. There's a multitude of creativity, but it's presented in a way that is very corralled. It's presented in a particular format, in a particular way, and it doesn't really invite people to think or to experience things in a different way. It tells you how you should experience things. And I think that what I've found over the years is that this idea of magic, well, maybe we should just go here for a brief second,
Brilliant.
if I may, is that I believe that human beings are magical creatures, along with animals, insects. They they don't know what consciousness is. No, they call it the hard problem of consciousness. No scientist can tell you what parts of the brain light up when you're in love, but they can't tell you what love. They can't tell you what love is. So love is a presence in reality, but they can't. You can see the effects of it. So you could say that. I mean, I don't really like this, but it's a way of looking at it. Is that what we see and what we experience is an interface. It's like, with your computer, the desktop doesn't show you all the ones and noughts. It shows you the folders and the things like that you can actually navigate. So this body and this mind is a way that we navigate reality. And I think that magic is magical, and it's been downgraded. So magic in our culture is just kind of entertainment. And we ignore the fact that we don't even know what we are. We don't know what anything is. We don't even know what a blade of grass. We don't know what makes something alive. We have no idea. And yet we're told that we're machines. We're told we're just, meat machines. And we're not even we don't even come into being the same way that a computer or an AI or anything would come into being. We're completely different. And, if we can open to the fact that there is a magical reality, this is it, and we're in it and we're experiencing it, the more we allow ourselves to open to that possibility, then we are gifted things. We can start to see things. We start to see energies. We start to relax. Our nervous system actually starts to relax to the point where we start to see reality in a completely different way. And the way I look at it is this. I want the creative mind of an artist. I want the wisdom and peace of a guru or a philosopher, you could say. And I want the physiology of an athlete. So
Wow.
it's kind of like a trinity. If we can have those things, and I believe that when we are in a magical reality, we inhabit that and we see it and we experience it and we allow that to shape our lives, then that's what we end up with. That's what we get.
Wow. Love it so much. I want to squeeze in another question, my dear. I feel I'm being bombarded at the moment by an energy, a demand to take on and accept and love AI and art, the art side of it, and ChatGPT and all of that malarkey. And then I was blown away. The incredible business coach that I'm working with at the moment, who I highly recommend. I was like, talk to me about this, because, I needed direction. I needed my heart to be recognized. I think my empath said HSP part was going, no.
Yeah.
With that said, all of these kind of full-on business coaches are like, no, you must take it on. You're gonna fail if you don't. And thank God my business coach is going, no, it's okay. He didn't say it like this, but it's right. It's okay, dudes. Intimacy is where it's at. I'd love to know, like, what do you think when you see this AI art, and do you think we need to embrace it? Do you have you got it all worked out, David? I'd love to know what you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's a really important one too. And I think it still comes back to that original point that I made, that I think we missed the point that, AI, we human beings created this technology, and we understand where that originated from. And of course, what you end up with is super intelligence. But it's super intelligence, but the lights aren't actually on. So there's no sense of that, of what an AI understands what it's like to be, to have that experience of being a conscious self. Now, people say, I mean, if you're Ray Kurzweil or whatever, you said they talk about this singularity point, and that's the point where AI suddenly becomes conscious of itself, and I think I really do feel that that's a misnomer, and I think that's a particularly wrong way of looking at the whole thing. I think they're mistaken in the fact that they believe that it's a level of complexity of physical matter that creates consciousness. So you still start from the perspective that consciousness is an emergent phenomenon out of matter, whereas I think it's completely the other way around. And lots of in philosophy, it's called idealism, or some people even call, even there's another word which is panpsychism, which is like everything's conscious, which is very much like animistic way of looking at shamanic way of looking at it. But I'm more of an idealist, so I think consciousness is primary. Everything is consciousness. Everything arises in consciousness, and I think that maybe in time to come, of course, maybe sooner than we think, that there will be this connection of biology and technology for sure at some point. Maybe it's already happened. Maybe it's already happening. But I think that we must see it for what it is, and a piece of art that's traveled through spirit into a nervous system and through a human mind with all its incredible infinite possibilities of the mind, its ability to dream, its ability to feel pain, all of that piece of art that emerges from that qualitatively, like I said, has a different spirit. Now, I look at AI art, and some of it is absolutely mind-bogglingly amazing. However, there's something already that just doesn't have any spirit for me.
Oh, yeah. You've put your finger on it. Thank you. That's what I've been feeling.
Yeah. So it ticks all the boxes. It's better than probably any human could render something. It seems more fantastical on some level than any, and yet it seems empty thus far. I mean, that may change, but thus far, for me, it lacks spirit. And there's no other way for me to describe that. And I have no real axe to grind on that level. I mean, I've done what I've done. I've been very lucky in my career. I've done amazing things. I've worked with amazing people. So I'm not looking, I don't feel threatened by AI as an artist. It's, if it's better than me at rendering a piece of art, then so be it. But for me, it doesn't have that spirit. And that goes for a lot of things, and I think the more, like I said before, we tune into this magical nature of reality, the more empty we see those things becoming, because we feel things on a different level. We sense something with a lot of AI. I sense something's off with it. It doesn't quite happen somehow. I don't know. And it again, it's an internal feeling about something. But, I mean, that doesn't mean that it won't produce amazing things and it won't have benefits along the way. I mean, obviously, it's probably already in the wrong hands, which is and it's probably it's quite alarming to a lot of artists and a lot of creators, because there's a lot of artists that I speak to saying, well, what's the point anymore? This can do things better than I can. But I don't feel that, I think if you really look at it, most of it doesn't have any spirit as it stands. So,
yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. And scarily, apparently, you ask it to do a task in the morning, it comes back with something, and you ask it to do the same thing in the afternoon. Apparently it's improved 100-fold, which is, it's a bit weird. I must say I've definitely got resistance, and I'm not ashamed of admitting that. David, oh my God, like really, we could have talked for hours and hours and hours. You have a free gift for everyone, which
I do.
It looks amazing to me. Tell us a quickie, and I'll put the link for everyone. They've got a discount code and everything. So
basically get it for free.
The art of turning your creative gifts into gold.
I call it creative alchemy, and it's a masterclass series, video masterclass series that I've created, and really it's to help people do exactly what it is that we've been talking about. So you don't need to come at it from it. Like I said, it's not a positive thinking thing. It's not like it's a real way of approaching your life in so that you open up to the highest possibility that your life is capable of creating. And I call it creative alchemy because it uses all of your problems, all of your challenges, all of the things that you bring to the mix. It teaches you how to literally turn those situations into opportunities and possibilities. And that's really all we're looking for. I mean, it's not going to cook dinner for you or anything like that. It's not necessarily going to go on a date for you and find your, but it's going to augment you and orientate you in your life in a way that allows you to be not only creative, but effective, and also experience what can only be termed as a high quality of existence, because that's really what we're looking for. We want a high quality of existence. And if there's anything that we can do in order to enable that possibility, then, I mean, I've spent, God knows how many years. I mean, well, God does know how many years, but
that's an amazing gift. I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's kind of got like
So grateful.
40 years worth of research
You had to think
encrypted into
about that,
that.
didn't you? David, thank you so much, my angel. Literally angel, De Angelis. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure.
And thank you all for listening. And I was going to apologize for the glitches, but I actually think they added to the magic. So thank you all for listening, for watching, and enjoy the free gift. Thank you again, David. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.